Hi everybody, welcome to our Song of Ice and Fire reread series. This is week 8, which is actually, we only have 2 left to go, and we are joined by John, aka AU Packnewell. His channel is linked down below. It's so great to have you here, and of course the lovely Clare Gray, who is also here. And we have a Tyrion sandwich today, everything from Tyrion 7 to Tyrion 8, which is chapter 56 to 62, and we've a small section next week. I was saying it to John earlier. I think we only have 5 chapters next week, but they're 5 big ones. But yeah, we're starting with Tyrion 7, and we get to meet a really big character at long last. So since it's your first time, John, we're going to start with you. What did you think of Tyrion 7?
I thought it was a great accomplishment that Tyrion had been able to take the clansmen and bring them to the Lannister fold, with the promise of armor, obviously, and weapons. But that was an easy, I think, compromise. But to have all of those men in the basically to put in the vanguard later on, but I thought it was just great that Tyrion was able to accomplish this. By the way,
Claire?
thank you very much for having me on. Hello to everybody,
It's great
including
to have you
Sunny,
on.
who usually watches from Florida. And thanks
Absolutely.
for letting me be on with you and Claire.
Thank you for joining us. It's brilliant to have you on. Yeah, so Claire, I agree with you on the Klansmen. Actually, I want to talk a little bit about them as well. Claire, what about you? What do you think of Tyrion?
It's interesting you'd say that, John, because it does come up, I think, in the last Tyrion chapter in this section, where Tyrion's reflecting about how Jaime can make men love him and go into battle for him and follow him, and he's kind of reflecting on how men don't do that for him. He's only got his name and the promise of gold. But actually, he does manage it. And I think he manages it, yes, by saying, I'm a Lannister, and this is what I can get for you. I can give you the Veil. I can give you new weapons. But when it comes down to it and they're in battle, they are all crying for him. They're all shouting his name and shouting, half man, half man. So I think he's doing himself a disservice, really. I think he does have maybe even as much potential as Jaime to make men love him. I think he's got a lot of issues when it comes to how he feels about himself and how he projects other people's feelings onto himself. But yeah, I think he did a very good job. Just wanted to point out that it was for the first time I really kind of thought about the culture of the Mountain Men and the Mountain clans. And I thought it was quite refreshing that they were described as, well, pretty democratic, free men. So, the women have rights, and they're basically like the wildlings of Westeros, of the Seven Kingdoms. And there's something quite appealing about the Mountain clans.
Yeah, I think so too. I think I actually made a note of that as well. The culture of the democracy, the rites of passage. I forgot all about that stuff, like what they have to do in their different clans to be accepted, and yeah, the role of the women and all that kind of thing. But how ineffective it is, like how it takes them ages to make decisions and things like that. I know as a rule, we don't talk about the show, but I am interested in getting your feedback here. One of my favorite scenes from the first series is how we meet Tywin. I was going to say Tywin Dance, played by Charles Dance. It's an iconic scene where he is actually butchering a deer, I believe it is, and we meet him through Jaime. And it got me thinking. I never really thought about it before, about the effect we have of the effect that has on us as a TV audience, meeting him through Jaime as opposed to meeting him through Tyrion as we do here. I'm not necessarily totally on board with the Jaime, Cersei are Targs theory. However, I think the Tyrion is a Targ theory doesn't wash for me simply just from this chapter. He is definitely Tywin Lannister's son, and Tywin is definitely his father. But it may add more credence to the Jaime Cersei theory, because we hear about Jaime, and we're going to hear about Jaime, I think in almost all of the chapters running up to the next Tyrion chapter. There's an allusion to Jaime in some sort of way, and allusions to Rhaegar in some of the chapters as well. And I just feel like, yeah, I think it's really important that we meet Tywin through Tyrion, because that's the son he didn't want, but it is his son, and I think it would be really fitting if it was his true-born son as well. And I think you're right, Claire. I think there is way more potential for Tyrion to be loved and followed by men than Jaime, because I think Jaime isn't that lovable by men. That he might intimidate them, and he doesn't really ask to be warmed to either. So yeah, I just wanted to know what you thought of that introduction of Tywin. And also the other thing that I wanted to point out was that just how slow information moves through Westeros. Tyrion hadn't heard at that stage that Robert was dead. So yeah, just how slow it moves. But what did you guys think about that, the introduction of Tywin through Tyrion's eyes? I mean, he's the only Lannister POV we have right now, but how did you guys feel about that?
John?
I was going to say ladies first.
There's no ladies here.
Well, all I've got really is the introduction of Tywin is quite interesting. In terms of the relationship with Tyrion, he seems to, like, Tyrion is quite impudent and he gripes quite a lot, and they have this habit of kind of putting each other down publicly in front of other people. So up to now, we've only seen Tyrion interact with Tywin in front of other people, and I think he feels a bit more safe when there are other people there. It's kind of like there's something there for show. I thought it was mean that Tywin orders Tyrion to squash Beric and Thoros. He kind of sends them off on this suicide mission before things change, but well, not that much. He sends him on another suicide mission into the van, but with the mountain. So I mean, I don't know whether Tyrion really is disposable to Tywin. I can't quite get the measure of their relationship yet, but I just thought it was fascinating that as powerful and as imposing as Tywin is, Tyrion has no gripes at all about really taking the piss out of his dad in front of everybody. And also this kind of depreciating humor that Tyrion has. Is almost like he second guesses his father before his father can insult him. He kind of does it himself. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting that he's obviously, Tywin is outwardly very confident in Jaime, very confident that the lions can defeat the wolves, and very manipulative the way that because again, in my mind, there's that kind of what I can remember from the TV show and then what I can remember from the books the first time round. And there's so much detail that I'm misremembering things in my mind. I thought that Tyrion roped them into the battle, and actually it was Tywin. Yeah. Tywin managed to very cleverly kind of like bring them into the fold and find a use for them. Which I thought was, so that just completely underlines him as a very capable and fearsome battle strategist.
It's almost like they're working together in that scene, even though they don't mean to, but they each know what the other is thinking, I think. And it speaks volumes about their relationship. I'm sorry, I don't buy the Tyrion as a Targ thing. Sorry to anyone out there that does. I never did. I think it's way more poetic if he is Tywin's son. It'd be even more poetic if he's his only son.
Yeah.
The other thing actually is that one of the things that's kind of skipped over is that we find out that Jaime has already crushed Vance and Piper. So that is, they went with Dondarrion, right? So they're up there with Beric. So they've already been crushed. So that's how effective Ed's strategy is. Ned's strategy, the one decision he made is already gone. And it's such as like, it's gone, done.
Yeah.
Sorry, John, I think I interrupted you there.
No, not at all. I was curious as to what you saw in this chapter that made you confirm that Tyrion is not a Targaryen.
For me, it's just that relationship with him and Tywin, and how they're very much cut from the same cloth, or Tyrion is cut from Tywin's cloth. They think very alike. They know when to use flattery. They know when to use a threat, very effectively. And I think Tyrion learns how to use flattery sparingly, or how to insult. Like, because Tywin he flatters them and then insults them. Oh, well, if you don't, I don't need you to do this. Like, I've got plenty of my own men that won't be afraid. So I think that's that's definitely something Tyrion can do instinctively. Now, he could have learned that from Tywin, of course, but I feel like it's way more, I just think it's way more poetic if they're more alike than they are different. And that's a genetic thing for me, not just a nurture thing. But I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong. Where do you stand on that, John?
Well, I think it would be poetic because of, later in the books we learn that Tyrion obviously kills Tywin, and Jaime had killed supposedly his father, that type of thing. But one of the things that Tyrion doesn't do is he doesn't totally annihilate his enemy. Like Tywin, if he's got an enemy, he'll just, like Duskendale or the Tarbex, etc. Even now, he does the same thing. So that's one of the things that Tyrion doesn't do that Tywin does.
Yeah.
I mean, even with Tyrion's wife, he just totally, crushed her and their relationship to where it would be unrepairable.
Yeah.
And I don't see that.
It's Tyrion definitely does that to his detriment. I think he isn't Tywin enough when he's making certain decisions, for sure. But yeah, no, I agree. I'm actually even more interested in theories around Tyrion when we get to Tyrion 8, though, because we're going to meet another really important character. Right. And it's interesting that they're both kind of put together like that in his narrative. Did you guys have anything else you wanted to say? I quickly say hello to Sunny and Lisa as well, who are in the chat. Yes. Did you guys have anything else to say, or shall we move on to everybody's favorite? Sansa.
No, just very quickly to say I agree with you, Kat. I think Tyrion and Tywin are kind of inextricably linked, and there are certain things like, Joanna was the only person to make Tywin smile, but Tyrion was the person to take Joanna away from Tywin. They both seem to have a proclivity for whores. And if you think about the other, the precious golden twins that Tywin invests so much into, it's just like Cersei wants to be like Tywin, but she never can be. And Jaime, I don't think Jaime's anything like Tywin at all. I think they're completely different. But yeah, it's you can just almost see Tywin as a young man through Tyrion, and I think Tyrion's edges are softened a little bit by the genetics of his mother. And actually, we need to remember as well that Joanna Lannister was a Lannister before she became a Lannister. So he's very pure Lannister blood, Tyrion.
Yeah, the seed is strong.
Mm.
So we're moving to Sansa, who spends most of her chapter kind of thinking about how she can save her father and her marriage, which is kind of interesting coming in from the Tyrion chapter. That's the marriage she will end up with. So I don't know about you guys. I find this chapter incredibly difficult to read, just on behalf of Barristan, but it makes me more curious than anything. I have more questions than answers with this one. So this is the chapter where Sansa begs for mercy for Ned, and where Barristan Selmy is emasculated and deknighted. Well, not deknighted, but deknights, and where Joffrey proves that nobody really listens to him properly. Andor Clegane, without being a knight, is actually promoted to the Kingsguard. So, Claire, if we start with you this time, maybe what did you get out of this chapter this time round? Oh, I think you're on mute there.
Sorry, I'm just going to say I haven't got many notes on this chapter. I think just again to underline that Sansa is acutely aware that she's alone and that she doesn't have anywhere to go, and she's a child, you know, but she's still very naive in her thinking at this point. But there is this definite, I'm being, you know, I'm alone in this situation. I mean, she even, you know, she seems to have forgotten about Arya. But yeah, I think that the Joffrey's demands and his, you know, according lordships, and you know, he did the way that he was making demands and denouncing people and promoting people. It just kind of felt like felt like a cabinet reshuffle. So he's promoted Tywin to Hand of the King, Cersei replacing Stannis on the small council. So you can see politically how things have been moved around by the demands that Joffrey's making. Slint becoming Lord. I didn't realise this, that Slint became Lord of Harrenhal. And I mean, I know that he got a place on the small council, but I didn't realise that Harrenhal was given to Janos Slint, and know that at some point in the future it's given to Littlefinger. But that threw me. I must have just completely forgotten about that.
I can't remember why I remembered that it went from Slint to Littlefinger, but I couldn't remember how it went from to Littlefinger. He does something later on, but I can't remember.
The negotiation between him and little Robert Arryn.
Ah, yes. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it would, you know, extremely passive-aggressive behaviour from Cersei about how, and you can almost feel Barristan seething about her alluding to your Kingsguard, but you didn't do your job, you let the king die. That's just, you know, to somebody like Barristan, and he proclaims loudly, "I shall die a knight," and ultimately he probably will die a knight. And thinking about that, actually, it should be no surprise to anybody that he turns up in. I mean, I remember in the books it was like, "Oh my God, it's Barristan," and being quite surprised about it. You know, the old Whitebeard. But we shouldn't really be surprised at this point, the way he kind of walks out of there. So there's a lot here about knighthood, you know, stripping a knight, becoming a knight when you really don't want to be a knight. Like, I mean, the Hound Sandor said, you know, "Yeah, I'll join your Kingsguard, but I'm not a knight." Just to make that clear to everybody, I am not a knight. What else have I got? I think that's pretty much all I've got here. In Sansa's plea, she asks for mercy, and again, I think she probably will be asking for mercy, but in a different way way later on into the story, and that kind of, you know, brings Arya back into it again. And of course, she's left in this predicament now where she has to pretty much denounce her father and persuade him to confess and admit that Joffrey is the one true king, which is just a horrible situation for everybody to be in. But it just presents this backdrop of how nasty things can get in King's Landing, in the Red Keep, and around the small council, and clearly Cersei's power vacuum in this situation. So yeah, I'm still quite sympathetic towards Sansa. I mean, I think with the first time I read this series of books, I was quite ambivalent towards her, but this time I'm feeling a little bit more. I'm kind of feeling the situation that she's in.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. Yeah, John, so what do you think?
So on this chapter, the one thing that she did really well was she observed the missing tapestries, which I'm very interested in. I think these hunting tapestries are not just regular hunting. I think they have to do with the whites. And I think that's why Peter is so interested in them. But as far as the rest of it, I think we've all experienced this in the show very well. And I think Cersei did a great job in isolating her. So she is feeling so lonely and like there is no other alternative other than to surrender and give in to whatever their demands are. I think Cersei did a good job that way. And as far as Barristan goes, that was a total blunder on all parts.
And also, my big question is, I never thought of that actually with the tapestries. That's like genius, because Littlefinger is also stockpiling grain and stuff later on in the series, so he's definitely preparing for winter. So that would make total sense. My big question about Barristan is, why did they keep him on the King's Guard after the Trident? Like, how did Robert ever even keep him, having sworn an allegiance to Rhaegar? I'm really interested in how this vow works on the King's Guard. Does it just transfer to the next king, even if that king isn't isn't from your family line, even if he won the throne by rebellion? It seems very I don't know, like I feel like Joffrey has to make them go after him. And he's right. Like, he's right to go after him. Like, it's too dangerous letting him out there after what he just said. Which I feel like Ned is now in like a prison cell for saying as much as like Barristan said. Pretty much, like Barristan pretty much said, "You're not the real king."
Well, he was a witness to what's going on, and that hurt his honor. That the king, wrote this decree, and the queen ignored it. But as far as the Robert and Barristan goes, the books do a great job of explaining how well Robert was able to go to battle with men and fight against them, and then that night they're drinking together. And I think they did that with Balon Greyjoy. I think obviously Barristan was a great knight, and he shouldn't be punished because he happened to be allegiance with a madman.
Yeah, I feel, I don't know, it feels like an error on Robert's part. I'm very happy to have Barristan around, but yeah, I don't know. I still feel like it's a big red flag as to why Robert isn't a good king. You don't have to kill the King's Guard, but you probably should get your own King's Guard. You should probably replace them, because
I think you can. I mean, yeah, Joffrey's just done that, hasn't he? He's just reshuffled everyone around. So it's possible to do that. I think Barristan was such a legend that it probably would have caused more of a fuss to get rid of him. he's just so honourable and loyal that he's an asset to the Kingsguard, whoever the king is.
I suppose if they're going to reinvent the wheel, like it's better to have a few. Hi, Simon. It's better to have a few kind of old like legends, as you're saying there. My thing was a couple of things. One thing that was repeated a couple of times was the king has decreed it so, and then the next sentence is the small council consent. And it made me wonder: is there ever a time when the small council dissents, like it doesn't give the king the consent? And yeah, I'd like to know a little bit more about the nature of what a small council is. And also, I completely forgot about Arya and Rickon being called to pledge their fealty to Joffrey. I completely forgot about that. And I assume that decree is read in every little town and village throughout Westeros. So yeah, I just completely forgot about that. And also when they summon Stannis, which I'm going to have a lot of Stannis questions later on. When they summon Stannis, a lot of lords start mumbling. Lost my word there. Murmuring. That's the one I wanted to say. Murmuring in the background, and it kind of made me think that there is going to be a little bit of dissent, or like, and we will see that anyway. But just that. I think it's like you said, this is all about knights, and I think it means a lot more having it come from the point of view of Sansa, who is so like she has that so ingrained, that idea of knights and what they are about and honor, and just to see, like, you can feel how she feels it's really painful watching Barristan go through this. The other thing that I have to mention, because I'm a fan of LaDonna, and I have to mention the black dyed dress and the idea of cloaks, and Barristan being decloaked and Sandor getting his cloak. It is a motif that follows Sansa throughout the novel, this idea, or throughout the series, the idea of cloaks and dyed dresses, and they become like masked to her feelings and that kind of thing. So it really does start. It started in her last chapter, but it really kind of is pushed forward as a motif from here, and it's something that's going to mark her out as being separate to Cersei, who doesn't dress in mourning the way Sansa does, and it's kind of yeah, it's just something that's part of her character. So I really like that idea, and the show have continued with that motif as well. Penrose is also in the chat. Hi Penrose, how are you? And Simon asks, why is Littlefinger the one arguing for the removal of Selmy? Is it not Varys they want for? Is it not Varys that wants him for Dany? I don't know. Would Varys have? Well, Varys already thinks that he's going to. It depends. If you buy into the Fagon storyline, then Varys wouldn't really need him for Dany. I don't know. I think Littlefinger wants to get rid of anybody he can't control, and Barristan is definitely somebody he can't control. What do you guys think?
Totally agree.
Yeah, I just think he's just too much of a. He's too honourable, and that's why he wants to get rid of Ned as well. He can't manipulate Ned any further than he has.
Anyone he can't manipulate is an enemy to Littlefinger. Yeah. I've got one final question on this chapter. When Joffrey is denouncing everyone and making his demands that people come and swear fealty, he does mention Prince, and the quote is Prince Doran Martell and all his sons. And that made me pause, because I thought, am I, again, misremembering? I thought there was only Quentyn. I mean, they could mean his future, in case he has any future sons, I guess.
Trystane, yeah.
Of course, yeah. I totally forgot about him. Completely forgot about Trystane. Yeah, never mind. Thank you.
He's the only one in the show, isn't he?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Oh, Clare.
Fast
Joe.
forward. Yeah, so that's Sansa's chapter, and we move on to Ed 15, our second last ever Ed chapter. It doesn't get any easier for him, and he is in the dungeons way down in the dark, and it opens with that horrible description of the place smelling like piss and straw, and he says that the dark was absolute, and that he kind of gives in to the blindness. And it made me think of Arya, of course, and the whole time I'm reading this chapter I'm going, where is Arya? Like, where is she? Like, everybody must be wondering where she is, because we've had her mentioned in Sansa's chapter, though Sansa doesn't really wonder that much about where she is. She doesn't really worry about her that much. And there's a couple of great lines in this chapter, I feel. We get that line, the king dies, the hand is buried, except for Tywin. I felt like Tywin is the only one who gets away with that. Jon Arryn didn't, but Tywin did. He has the famous flashback, almost as famous as Tower of Joy, though not quite. The famous flashback to the day the Smiles died. All the Smiles died, the tourney of Harrenhal. And I have a couple of questions here. There's a great he remembers Jaime being kind of brought into the Knights, the Kingsguard, and how he was wearing like white scaled armor, which again made me think of Targaryen, which obviously he would have been a Kingsguard for the Targaryen at the time. And then he talks about how he reaches in this kind of hallucination / dream, he reaches for Lyanna's crown of blue roses, but he forgets that there's thorns in there, and then he thinks about Promise Me Ned, and it made me wonder parts of the promise. And we've talked about this in the last couple of weeks, Claire. I don't think the promise is as straightforward as people think it's going to be. There's something that Ned couldn't do. There's something that he can't forgive himself for not being able to do. And I feel like that's the thorny part of that promise. There's something too painful even to remember, like, because all of this stuff seems to come back when he's either drugged or he's out of it with pain. Like, there's some sort of, he's repressed it so much, it's that painful, whether it's psychological or physical, it's hard to know. I kind of feel then when Varys comes to it, that he has this choice, that the next time they can either bring him wine or milk of the poppy or Sansa's head, that it really is down, it's that simple. But I feel like Ned is dead either way. And I think Varys really does know that. And yeah, we also get the reference to Balerion the kitten, which I know a lot of fans like in this chapter. But yeah, I have a couple of questions. Is Ned now dead regardless of what choice he makes? What is the thorny part of that promise? And why didn't Varys tell Robert that Cersei and Jaime were the parents of his kids? Because Varys must have known, and it wouldn't have put too much of a spanner in Varys's plans to break the Lannister alliance, right? So I wonder, why didn't Varys try and get that information to Robert, or maybe he'd regret later on not getting that information to Robert, because surely that would have, if he'd done that years before, that might have saved a lot of pain. But yeah, so they're my three questions. Is Ned now dead? The Tourney promise, and why didn't Varys tell Robert? Sorry, I went on a little bit too long there. So whoever wants to take that first. John, do you want to take that first?
Sure. As far as Ned, nobody really expected him to be dead at that point. Even Cersei wanted him to take the black and go north. So she didn't want to make an enemy of the north. She knew that would be a mistake. As far as the tournament goes, I don't think it had to do with his sister. I think it had more to do with Ashara and that missed opportunity. And as far as the last one varies, that's a really good question. But you've got to remember, the Lannisters have all the money, all the power, all the influence from all the Westerlands, and he knows because Varys was on the council when Aerys was the king. So he knows the influence of the Lannisters from 20, 30 years ago. So he doesn't want to make them his enemy. Not so obviously, if that makes sense. Inadvertently, no problem. Behind the scenes, no problem. But just like he told Ned, I don't have a weapon. I'm not a knight. I'm not going to do, I'm not going to defend you in front of the Red Keep. It's just not going to happen. So that, I think, is the best way to answer that. But I'd like to hear what Claire has to say.
Yeah. No, that's knowing what we do now, that Joffrey may have been manipulated by Littlefinger into executing Ned. Did Varys just underestimate Littlefinger's abilities there? I feel like because we never get a point of view from either of those characters, I kind of feel Littlefinger always has the upper hand, even over Varys. But yeah, no, you've answered all my questions.
That's because of the brothel. You got to remember, he had that way of manipulating people and gathering information.
That's
much
true.
more so
Varys
than
doesn't understand sex. Yeah. So Claire, what do you think?
I think it's easy to say, isn't it, in hindsight and retrospectively, that yes, Ned's dead, he's not coming back from this, but the symbolism is quite heavy here. I mean, you mentioned before about the description of the black cells and the darkness, and it just kind of reminded me of when Tyrion was in the sky cells, and the graffiti on the wall is about, going into the blue, and Ned's now gone into the black. You could say that he's taken the black, and then you could say that the symbolism there is once you take the black, that's it, you give your life up. That's, there's all of you. I suppose it all kind of ties together. But I think what it means is, yes, he's not coming out of this situation alive. And of course, it's easy for me to say that because we know what happens. I think that it's very interesting that he thinks about Ned in his weird, trippy dream state in the black cells. He's thinking about young Robert again. These seem to be his first thoughts in the chapter. He's thinking of young Robert, and he's saying, I lied to you, I hid the truth. And it is very painful. And he's talking about broken promises. So if the accepted theory is Lyanna asked him to make a promise to raise her son, not let Robert know who it was, hide him, tell everyone that he's your bastard, and that's the promise. Well, it seems to me that everything we're reading up until this point is Ned basically confessing that he didn't keep that promise, that he broke some kind of promise. And it's also interesting that when he thinks of Cat, it's very painful for him as well. And I don't think that that's just him missing his wife and wanting to see his family again. There's some real pain behind the memory of Cat at the same time that he's thinking of a young Robert and things that have happened in the past. So it's not painful for him now in the present, but something happened that is painful for him when he thinks about Cat in the past. So there's something there. I think that the false spring as a concept is very interesting, and I think there's lots of, I think it's just a representation, that phrase, the false spring, when he travelled down from the Eyrie to Harrenhal to attend the tourney, that you could badge a lot of things in this time period as being false and fake, and that we don't really know what happened. We're just, again, relying on people's very messed up dream states and memories. And I think the false spring is a metaphor for lots of things that happened in this time frame that were also false and fake. So yeah, when Ned, there's in this chapter, it says that Ned is talking to himself. I mean, you would, you sat there in complete darkness. You can't even see your hand in front of your face. It's that dark. So he begins to talk to himself. And when I read that, I was kind of going, oh, shh, Ned, don't do that, because can Varys hear what the walls have ears, and can people hear what you're saying and whatever it is you're revealing? And, yeah, so did Varys hear him? That was, I suppose, my question. Interesting that at this point, Varys proclaims that his mission, his ends are peace and serving the realm. And he doesn't really seem to deviate from that throughout the rest of the story. We kind of get the impression that of the two of these Machiavellian type of characters, that Littlefinger is the baddie and Varys is the goodie. That's the kind of general feeling that we get. But, and I suppose this plays into your question as well, Kat, about why didn't Varys tell Robert? He could have saved a lot of problems. I don't think he's necessarily interested in individuals and their motivations. If what he's saying is true, he serves the realm, and what he's interested in is peace. There's a much bigger, he's taken a helicopter view of all of this. He's taken a much bigger picture viewpoint of all of this. So and again, I agree with John. I don't think it would have served him very well to get into, not without anyone behind him. He's operating as a lone wolf, really, Varys, at the moment. Maybe with a little bit of help from Illyrio.
So, just getting back to what you guys are saying then, John, you were with Ashara Dane and Clare with Ned's broken promise. So you guys do you guys think that he did have a bastard child with Ashara? Do you think that there is some sort of broken promise on that end? Because I kind of do think that. I think he did have a child, whether it survived or not, I'm not sure. But I think he did have a bastard child. It's not John, though. Is that where you guys are at?
Yeah, I'm definitely on that boat. There's too much evidence to show that, especially with Ned Dane, his POV chapters that we'll talk about later. He was definitely one of those people that you got the feeling that they were definitely in love, and there was no bad feelings. And if you killed my uncle and basically caused my aunt to commit suicide, you wouldn't have those feelings for him.
Yeah. I wonder, will we ever get full answers to that, though? Like, it's one of those things, I feel like there's going to be a lot of loose ends by the time we get to Dream of Spring. I just don't know how he's going to tie them all up. Unless there's another book. A further Dream of Spring.
But I think I quite like the theory, and there's a number of different theories. Some of them are similar, some of them are, that are opposed to the R plus L equals J. I quite like the idea that there was a relationship between Ned and Ashara, and when you think about the timescales, that potentially they could have spent a fair amount of time together, enough for her to get pregnant. So I know that everyone goes, oh, baby swap, but I think there's something to this. I think it's reflected later on with John and the little monster, and Gilly's baby. I think it's. I think it could potentially. I quite like the theory that Rhaegar and Lyanna, maybe they did have a child, and Ned and Ashara, maybe they had a child. And because the Targaryen baby, Lyanna and Rhaegar's baby, would have been so Targaryen looking, that's where the baby swap happened. So I think that could be, you know, and actually Fagon is Lyanna and Rhaegar's child, and Jon is, you know, I think that potentially could have happened. I think that, you know, as much as it being R plus L equals J, just because of that, those two big clues there. Ned never really speaks unfavorably about Rhaegar, and he should, really. He really should. And as Jon said, you know, naming Eddard Dane basically after Ned, and the fact that there are no hard feelings when there really should be. And we know that people have these kind of resentful feelings. Not everybody is easygoing. Think about Robert and how he dreams night after night of killing Rhaegar again and again and again. It's never enough. That's how much he hates him. Yet Ned feels completely differently. Something happened there that we don't know about, and I think it's all being badged up in this very hazy dream state of the false spring.
Well, like Rhaegar,
yeah, I think
Robert is the only one who doesn't like Rhaegar. And actually, if you read between the lines, as we do, Ned has less, I don't know, he has more unfavorable feelings, I guess, and memories, I guess, for Lyanna than he does for Rhaegar. Like, there's an awful lot of pain, and at times it feels maybe a bit like resentment towards Lyanna for the position that she's put him in. And if we look at Lyanna as maybe foreshadowing the type of person that Arya is going to end up being, causing a lot of trouble potentially, doing it her way and regardless of the consequences, then that's definitely, we're going to have conflicted feelings about Arya as well, I think, from her siblings later on. Yeah, so I'm totally with you. I mean, I do buy into the R plus L equals J 90%, maybe 95%. But I'm definitely not somebody like I'm always wary when the fan base is so behind a theory, and especially. Am I back?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Oh, that was a cliffhanger. You said especially, and then it just froze.
Okay.
Especially
Especially when D&D are so behind the theory is what I was going to say. I think it works for the show, but I'm not sure if it's necessarily going to be that straightforward in the books. But,
I agree with you there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and we talked about that last week as well with the Night's King. So then we move in, unless you guys have anything else to say. I do like to think about the alternative history as well, about what would have looked like if Ned had ended up on the Night's Watch. That would have been good as well. Like that would have been good for the series, I think, as well. It's not one of those. It's like I'm gonna have in coming up in Kat's chapter. I'm gonna have if Rob had made this decision, then that might have changed the course of events dramatically. But I'm not so sure if Ned being at the wall would have. I think it would have been a good way to save Ned and be nice. I think just a nice little kind of thing up at the wall. But I guess Ned
I think the
did have
biggest
to
problem
die.
there is that Jon would have never been the Lord Commander, and he would have overshadowed him, just like Benjen was as the first Ranger.
It would have been interesting for Ned to maybe potentially being killed at Craster's Keep instead, or something like that. Later on. Either way, Ned had to die, right? But he can't keep Ned in the story and keep the mystery of Ashara and Lyanna going. That's the biggest problem with Ned's character, right? So, okay. Go, guys, you've been really active in the chat and I haven't. I'm so shit. Yeah, you've been talking about Dany and her Valyrian features, Simon. Yeah, we need wins, definitely. Okay, so we're on to Cat. God, I have so many notes on Cat. I'm gonna let you guys go first with this, because this chapter just kind of it kind of blew my mind a little bit, because there was information in it that I wasn't expecting until Clash. I forgot that it was here. And the same with the next Cat chapter, which I've read ahead to. There's so much here with the Frey. We meet a big character here. With Bolton and Frey, we meet a bit more in this here. Yeah, so Cat goes to meet Robb, and or sorry, no, she's already met Robb at this stage, and they are going to try and negotiate with the Freys to see if they can cross. I have a lot of questions here. John, do you want to take this first?
Well, the biggest problem I have with this is Robb submitting to his mother again and letting her negotiate with Walder, because she already knows they have a jaded past, in her opinion. And for him to be the king of the North, he really does have to take control of these negotiations. And I think this is the biggest mistake, because when you, as a man, say to another man, I'll marry your daughter, that's a huge commitment, and it's nothing to be taken. It's taken way too lightly by Robb. The squire's no problem, all the other conditions are no problem, but for him to commit to a marriage this early, and especially for the girls, that's just way too much. I don't think Robb would have negotiated it that way at all. He had done such a good job up to that point that I think he would have negotiated a lot differently, and it would have created a much better relationship for them going down the line. And other than that, I think it was a great chapter. It really showed the unity of the North and what they were trying to accomplish. So,
yeah, I totally agree. It's like Cat just assuming that she can just mammy him all the way into this. Like, it's ridiculous. And I'm not so sure she does a great job. I think Frey completely gets the upper hand, especially when he figures out straight away, what you mean, you don't know that your nephew is supposed to go to Dragonstone? Like, I mean, come on. How can I know that? I'm sitting here. How come you don't know that? You've already been with Lysa. You've already been to King's Landing. Like, he's instantly have got with Robb, because, as you said, it would have gone a different way, and it's an important thing. Yeah, and especially when she says before she goes in, expect nothing from Walder Frey. Like, but
not only that, Walder Frey actually summoned him. It wasn't, he didn't summon Catelyn, or Catelyn didn't, assume that she was going to go talk to him. He was actually summoning Robb to come into the twins.
And so she knows how he feels about women, and also her own father, which we talked about before, Claire. Her own father wouldn't let Edmure marry a Frey, which, by the way, I think is a huge error. I don't know why they couldn't marry this Frey. What's the big deal? Like, I mean, apart from anything else, has access to this crossing. I like, otherwise Edmure is single, and like, what's the plan for Edmure? He should have been married to a Frey girl a long time ago. Or Lysa. Why wasn't Lysa married off to a Frey son? So I don't know why it's okay for Hoster, but it's not okay for Robb. Like, Robb has to marry one. Like, that's not what your father would have done. It doesn't make any sense to me. But there's another thing that doesn't make any sense to me. But Claire, what do you think in relation to this?
Well, again, I think it's interesting that Cat thinks about her father and Edmure before she thinks about Ned and the children. There's something there. There's something about, especially when she says, again, taking quotes, and we know that George likes to put double meaning into certain things, and I think this may be one of them. She says some truths did not bear saying and some lies are necessary. So I think she was definitely on a mission at Winterfell, sent by her father. I'm still trying to figure out what that is, whether it's just kind of mixing but being able to have the North in their pocket, whether or not it goes even further back than that, and it's about mixing the Andals with the First Men. I don't know. I think there's some mystery that goes further than that. That might be about the power dynamics that exist with even between the religions, the old gods and the new gods. We know that Ned built a sept for Cat in Winterfell, and she still had her gods around her. She didn't forsake them and suddenly become Northern. In fact, everything we've heard from Cat so far has been almost like she's disgusted with the idea of the North. She just seems to have just tolerated it for so long. And she thinks so fondly of her childhood at River Run, and she's not happy to be there. However fondly she may think of Ned, I think she just appreciates Ned as an honourable man. But I think that's a happy coincidence that they just got on, and ended up having children. And I don't know. I just think there's something there, and I think again it comes up in this chapter. When she's talking to Rob, or when she's thinking about the comparisons between Rob and Ned, she always refers to him in her own mind as Ned rather than his father. So rather than saying, he learned his lessons from his father, she says he learned his lessons from Ned. So she doesn't refer to Rob and Ned in the kind of son. I just thought that was quite interesting. I thought it was interesting that Walder Frey kept saying, I think it was about 3 times in this chapter, he kept saying, I'm not dead yet. And it's like, does that mean, in my mind, that means he will outlive everybody? I mean, he's got to, if Walder Frey is put out of his misery earlier than necessary, then he won't ever see what happens to the rest of his family. He wants to build this huge empire, and what we all want to see is him witness it being destroyed in his own lifetime, which would be amazing revenge for the Red Wedding. So yeah, I think it's quite interesting that he keeps saying all the time that he's not dead yet. He might be old, but he's not dead yet. This question again with a different character has come up about where random, but where Sweet Robin should have been fostered. And this again, it's like, oh, it was Stannis at Dragonstone. No, it wasn't. It was Tywin at Castle Rock. And it's like, why do people keep talking about this? Why is this a big question? There's something there about that. And the only other thing I would say is, oh my God, that deal for the crossing was ridiculous. There's so many things that she just rolled over and submitted to immediately. There's a lot. So it's taken a personal squire, a Frey, Arya's betrothal, taking 2 Freys as wards at Winterfell, and Rob's betrothal. That is a lot. That is a huge list of demands for this deal, when in fact Cat
just for a crossing, right?
Yeah, just for the crossing.
Yeah.
And Cat in fact could have just marched in there and said, she could have been much more demanding as the daughter of the liege lord, and again, I don't know why I've written this, but I've written family duty honour again, for Cat, and I don't know what I was thinking at the time, but I just think that was a ridiculous deal that she brokered, and I completely agree with John. What a terrible mistake from both Rob and Cat, actually. Yeah.
Well, the thing I completely forgot about, Tywin Lannister is married to a Frey, or Tywin Lannister's sister is married to a Frey. Like, and also they have this thing, whereas if they wait in Moat Cailin, this is my big question. and I do not have a military brain at all, but they say if they wait in Moat-Cailin, Tywin Lannister will move north and take them from the rear. That I don't understand. How does that happen? From if like I don't understand.
Unless the rear faces south. That's the only thing you might be missing.
Ah, okay. Okay, well then that makes sense. So in other words, if they don't get the crossing, Tywin will. Right? So Tywin has to come north then, and they still have to meet him. So I
That's
don't.
why Ned wanted Catelyn to put the 300 archers at Moat Cailin from the beginning and
Yeah.
not do the veil thing and all that other stuff. That was critical error that she had.
So I don't like. I think this is, as you said, it all goes back to Rob not going in there, and he would have very quickly realized this is like, why don't I just go back to Moat Cailin and just wait it out? Tywin will have to come back, because there's a couple of things. He says that the Freys have already killed 2 Lannisters. There's been a little bit of fighting. That sounds like bullshit. And if it is, then we don't really know why those Lannisters were killed. Maybe they were raping and pillaging outside of their Lannister duties. We don't know. That could be bullshit. The other thing, I think you're right. I think he'll outlive all the original Illuminati, Claire, if nothing else. Yeah, so my big question here as well is 2 things. There seems to be a huge lack of communication, right? Why haven't they already gone for the Greyjoys? Why haven't they already looked at the sea option? And why haven't they already looked at the Stannis option? Like, why aren't they not already communicating with those 2 key pieces so that they can move by the sea? What is the hesitation here? I mean, Rob has 18,000 men now. You've proved that you can gather force. The next step should be sending out envoys or messages or something to Stannis. Get Stannis. That's a big problem here, and I think that the reference to little Robert going to Dragonstone again in this chapter is another kind of siren to Cat. Get Stannis. You need Stannis. Forget Frey. Go back to Moat Cailin. Get Stannis. There's a reason why Jon Arryn wanted. I mean, the fact that even Frey was well enough to travel to King's Landing kind of shows you that this guy is going to be around for a while, and he's a lot more savvy than you think. He's already been to King's Landing, and whether they like him or loathe him, he knows, he's savvy enough to know what's going on. So I said this to you before, Claire. I definitely think there was some sort of a slow-moving coup between Jon Arryn and Stannis to take the throne, or to at least remove the Lannisters and then take the throne. I really do think that was what was happening there. Jon Arryn just seems, as Walder Frey said, he, like Lysa, seems to be in complete control, and it seems like he was being pulled between Stannis and Lysa all the time. So yeah, I think that's there's a couple of red flags there. The other question is, Tywin seems a bit like Hitler in this chapter, in that he seems to be slowly taking Poland and then Belgium, and nobody seems to be doing anything. Like, none of the other lords around the country seem to be doing anything about this. And meanwhile, you've got, Britain and France trying to come up with a plan, and you've got all these kind of the allies trying to quickly come up with a plan, but they're not doing a very good job of it. So this, I think, is the most, this is chapter, more than any other chapter so far, is really prepping us for what Clash is going to look like and the different political alliances. There's a lot of red wedding stuff here as well. I feel like this is the chapter that maybe Roose Bolton realized that he's the Frey family of the North, that the Starks are always looking down on him, and that if they can't, like, when he wants to treat Rob, are they going to send in Cat? Are they going to send in his mother to talk to him? That kind of way. So yeah, I think this is the chapter where he's going to realize that, because Rob doesn't fully listen. to anybody but Cat, it seems, for some reason. But yeah, it's more of a frustrating chapter than anything else, right? This chapter, but yeah, I think that was all I had there anyway. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's difficult to get a grasp on time and timescales in throughout the story, really. I mean, one of the chapters, it kind of took my breath away that, especially with all the time traveling in the TV show, that Tyrion mentions that he's been away from home for a year. So he's kind of like been on the road for a year ever since they left to go to Winterfell. And he's been, you know, I mean, he's traveled a distance. He's been up to the Wall, and he's been, you know, so it's one long road trip. And it's taken quite a while. I think there's probably a number of reasons that they didn't send out help, for want of a better word, to Stannis and the Greyjoys. I think politically, maybe they just can't trust the Greyjoys, and they don't know Stannis very well. You know, I mean, maybe there was this kind of cautious hesitation. They do consider it later on.
Oh yeah.
Obviously,
yeah.
You know, it is considered. Both of those options are considered later on, but just not at this stage. But I think, yeah, maybe that just shows the naivety of Rob.
Well, it's just the fact that she knows now. This is like it's taken her a few months, right, to travel from the Vale probably back towards Rob. Maybe 6 weeks. But she has heard now, I think this is the third time she's heard that Robert was supposed to go to Dragonstone. So this is the third time potentially that the alliance between her brother-in-law and Robert's brother, King Robert's brother, has been pointed out to her. And I don't know. And also, I'm pretty sure Ned talked to her about contacting Stannis or something, didn't he? Did he talk to her? Maybe not. But I just feel like it's typical of Cat to miss the red flags. Like I said, when she was with Lysa, she missed all the red flags with Lysa, which is why she no longer has Tyrion as well. The other thing that at one stage she thinks in her mind when she's talking to him that she would roast him over a fire, which is never a good state of mind to be in when you're trying to negotiate like the crossing a river for your son's life. So are you with MP that Arya might be Cat and Ned's only trueborn? You don't go that far, do you, Claire? Because MP doesn't think that Ned fathered anyone except Arya with Cat.
No, I wouldn't add no.
I think that's his theory, right? Or is it just Rob that he thinks is Brandon's? I can't remember. I think he thought Rob.
I can't remember either. I know that he doesn't think. I think, yeah, he did the video with Bar where the theory was that Kat and Brandon had a child and it was Rob.
Yes, I think that's
yeah. But I don't know about the other children.
Yeah. So no, just when you were saying that she never really thinks about Ned
and the children, yeah. As
in terms
Rob's
of being
father.
a fault, yeah. But, Rob is not Ned 2.0. So I know for a lot of people they thought he was, but he's definitely not. And there's a lot of red wedding foreshadowing in this chapter.
Yeah, there's also a nice little mention from Theon about a pie when he talks about when he mentions the phrase, which made me laugh.
Yeah, it is shocking because obviously when you think about the red wedding, you think about the broken marriage pact, but it is shocking when you think about all the other stuff, like taking the 2 wards. Arya has to marry one of the Freys. Okay, so then we're on to John 7. If you've nothing else to say about Cat.
Just a quick question on Cat.
Yeah.
Claire brought up the fact that Cat might have had something going on with the alliance with the Winterfell. Keep in mind that Maester Lewin came to Winterfell with her, and the Maester at Winterfell left. His name was Willis. I assume he was a Hightower, but that is a really strange thing. She brought in her own Maester.
And also, Lewin is the one who says to Robb, if you don't march now, you can't march, which I never really understood either. Why can't he march? Why can't he just wait? Like, what's the hurry here? I still don't really know what the hurry is. Okay, they've taken Ned, but like he's been accused of treason. And he has committed treason, by the way. It is treason. Like, for everybody else in the country, it is treason right now. Except for him and Barristan, right? So yeah, that's a really good point, because I do not trust Lewin at all. But yeah, okay, so then we move on to Jon, and I think Mormont finally put his clothes on, and they're recovering from the White attack, and
We lost her again. She's gone. Here we go.
Sorry. There's a snowstorm, I think, so it's not the best. I don't know what it is. This keeps happening every week. It's every time I mention the Whites, I guess, is it? But yeah, so Jon gets Longclaw, and then maybe what would he be? Granduncle, maybe potentially a granduncle as well. With Aemon revealing that he is a Targaryen, which is so painful to listen to, that to read. I listened to and read this week, so I was listening to Roy Dotrice, and his Aemon Targaryen is really, really good. But yeah, so Jon, yeah, anybody want to take this first? Jon, will we give you Jon first? What did you think of Jon?
I was gonna say I went first the last couple of times, so let's
did you?
let Clare
Okay.
take it.
So Clare, sorry, I'm really crap at keeping up.
All right, no problem. The two Stark family members, term that loosely, especially with Jon, that appear to have lots of dreams are Ned and Jon. And again, he's having this dream about fighting an other with Ned's face, and then later on he has another dream about fighting a white that has Ned's face. There's some weird things that I want to point out about that I noticed from this chapter, and I know that on Westeros.org there are probably pages and pages and pages on the forum about Mormont's Raven. But I actually made the effort to write down the words that the Raven was saying in this chapter, and he says these words: well, father, boy, corn, take it, who will, claw, and crow. And this chapter particularly mentions two Valyrian steel swords. So you get the mention of Longclaw, and you also get the mention of Sam mentioning Heartsbane. And I took the liberty of rearranging some of the words of the Raven in light of the discussion between the two boys, the two sons, and Ned thinking about his father and fighting his father, and also dreaming about ice, and Sam thinking about Heartsbane and who Heartsbane eventually, you know, it'll probably go to Dickon, and he will probably never have Heartsbane. And you could rearrange it to father, crow, boy, who will take it, corn, which I thought was is like Heartsbane, because it's the rich fauna and flora of the, oh, what's the region? Where the Tyrells come from, Highgarden, and yeah, that area, because that's where the Tarleys, you know, the liege lords are the Tyrells, and Claw being relating to Jon. So to me, it felt like in Raven speak that Mormont's Raven was asking which boy will take which sword? Will Sam ever end up with Heartsbane? Will Jon ever end up with ice? Or is it going to be Jon and Longclaw? And also the fact that, again, it's father and son and sword. And it feels like in this chapter that the Raven, in its own weird little way, is kind of narrating its own story with these words: father, boy, take it, who will? And they're talking about the swords. Yeah, so I thought that was quite interesting. Obviously, as well, Longclaw is a bastard sword. I didn't really read into this the first time, but clearly Mormont does not want Jon to leave, and he's worried that that's exactly what's going to happen. And I think that Mormont probably sent out the boys, as we, in the next chapter, to retrieve Jon. He was not wanting to let him go at all. I think that was something that's been hush hush, and rather than it being, no, we're your friends, we want you to come back, and there's all this camaraderie like it's Hogwarts, it's not. I think Mormont definitely wanted to make sure that Jon went nowhere, and there were a few people roped into this. Sam unknowingly, Maester Aemon definitely. I think he gives him the sword to seal his loyalty to the Night's Watch, as well as thanking him for saving his life and being a man and becoming a man rather than a boy. Again, father, boy, take it, who will? I've made mention here about Jon having doubts again about Ned's honor. And he thinks this a couple of times. Ned Stark is so honourable, but hang on a minute, you fathered a bastard and I'm the bastard, so is he really that honourable? And Jon does have these kind of secret internal questions about Ned and about Ned's intentions and about his honour. Maester Aemon seems to read Jon's mind in this chapter. There's about 3 different occasions where Jon thinks about something, and almost immediately Maester Aemon answers that question. Yeah, there's a lot of talk in this chapter about, and there's that famous quote about love is the bane of honor and the death of duty. Yeah, again, heart's bane, love, bane of honor. So there's a lot in this chapter for me that ties the father and the son and the sword and the whole concept of honor and duty, and maybe you can forsake your honor and duty for love. Yeah, it's the fact that Maester Aemon seems to be able to either read Jon's mind, or he's blind, but he kind of seems to be able to see into Jon's head and read his thoughts, which I thought was a bit spooky. Yeah, and he makes it very clear about this. You make a choice and live with it for the rest of your life, as I have, and I've put in brackets, and as Ned did. So I think that a choice was made about a promise, it was broken, and Ned has been torturing himself living with this ever since. So yeah, that's pretty much what I got from this chapter, all about swords and fathers and sons and weird Raven interpretation.
In case any of you are wondering, this is why Jon calls her the Oracle, right?
I was just gonna say that she's so deep on this, and I'm gonna feel really bashful about what I'm gonna say next. So yeah, she does a great job.
Go ahead, say all you will.
Here's what I came up with on this whole chapter is that Jon got burnt. That was the part that really stuck out to me, because if George really wanted to confirm Jon is a Targaryen, he would not have gotten burnt, because over and over and over again in future chapters we talk about him flexing his hand and really feeling the pain of that burn, and all it was an oil lamp that he just threw at the white. So it wasn't like where he fell into a fire or something. It was it should have been just a small burn, but at any rate, that's what I came up with. And Claire's gonna make me feel really stupid here.
Not at
Anyway.
all. But no, it's a good point. But is this one of the reasons why George regularly points out that Dany is not fireproof? Regularly has to point out to the fandom that is a very singular, like she can tolerate heat a little bit better than most, but what happens at the end of this book is just a very singular, miraculous event.
He has to, because Dan and Dave overemphasize her fireproofness.
But
It's
even
like,
before that, even before when did that happen? The 6th series? When did she burn? No, this series. I'm so
the
confused.
Dashkali,
Yeah. When did she burn them? This
that was
series?
the end of 6.
Oh, the end of 6, yeah. So even before that, for years, he said that. But do you think so if Jon is half Targ, does his Stark blood interfere with his fireproofness? Or I don't know. But yeah, no, it's a good point. I think it's definitely something that we're supposed to pay attention to, I think, because it does come up again and again. In terms of like this chapter being all about not giving up, not like taking your oath seriously, taking honor seriously, and sometimes you have to leave love behind. Like love is the enemy of duty and honor and all that kind of thing. Then we have Heartsbane being like the name of the sword. I wonder, is that foreshadowing something with Sam and Gilly, that it will get in the way of him doing something later on, whatever he has with Gilly later on, maybe. And yeah, I think when Mormont, I kind of forgot that Mormont kind of christens Jon the White Wolf as well. Did he do that in the show? I can't remember him doing that in the show, right? So okay. So the other thing I wanted to ask you about, or both of you about, what do you think? But him like wanting to be marching, I don't know why. It kind of reminded me of Rhaegar a little bit. I don't know why. I have a note here and I can't remember what I was thinking at the time. The main thing I wanted to ask you, well, I have two things actually. Aemon says, what kind of man steals his own brother's birthright? And I just wonder, is that foreshadowing something with Jon later on? And also, can White Walkers or whites in general, if they're part of a hive mind, can they feel it when one or more of them is killed? This is my question, which nobody has an answer to. I'm well aware of that. But I'm just wondering, is that something, do you think that if they're part of a hive mind, will they know when part of the hive is being damaged or killed? Just something that occurred to me when they were talking about them being burnt down. But yeah, just wondering if that is foreshadowing anything, stealing a brother's birthright with Jon. What do you guys think? No, nothing.
It's a great question. I never even thought about it, to be honest with you. So I know Kat thinks about it when she thinks about Rob, and Jon being a bastard, and the whole who's the heir. But as far as Jon goes, I don't think that's anything he thinks about at all.
No, but I wonder, will he be put in a position where he'll be asked to do it? Where he'll be asked to steal a brother's birthright, maybe? Because
he does with Stannis, doesn't he? Stannis basically offers him Winterfell, which would be him stealing a brother's birthright
from Bran and Rickon. Yeah. And also we have Ned, who kind of always accuses himself, even though he hasn't, but he always accuses himself of having stolen Brandon's birthright, right? Like of having taken Brandon's place. I always kind of felt that Ned maybe would have gone to the wall had he not. I don't know. I think
I think he was lucky. Anything that Ned could find as an additional like torture implement to torture himself with, he would. He's just that. He's been carrying this, whatever it is, for so many years that he's very resentful of it. He's resentful of the fact probably that his brother ever put him in this position, you know, in the first place.
He's almost like Aemon Targaryen in that sense, isn't he? He's a little bit like, I think he would have loved to be in Aemon's position, maybe. And what did you guys make of Mormont's thing that he couldn't even look at the sword after what Jorah did? It's really odd, like, because we're going to see Jorah in the next chapter, and yeah, I have a few questions about Jorah in the next chapter, but yeah, it's hi Florrie, how are you? Yeah, but yeah, I really liked this chapter a lot. I thought there was a lot of Targ stuff, but I think you're right, John. I think there might be the old switch and bait, right? Or what do you call it? Like when he's giving you information, you think it's leading you one way, but it's leading you the other. Switch and bait, right? Is that what they say? Okay, so unless you have anything else, we can move on to Dany. And Dany and the Dothraki, who horrific. The Dothraki are horrific, right? The way they take the lamb people, the sheep people, and you know how I am with sheep versus dragons, and how I think there's a lot about sheep here. And we meet Miri Mazdur, who she claims as one of her women. I think there's a big problem in this chapter. It's very clear that the biggest problem with Dany is that she doesn't have a female influence and never has had in her life. So this leads her to make decisions here that Jorah is warning her that this isn't a good idea. But then later, he's instrumental in convincing her to take on this woman to heal Khal Drogo and to deliver the baby once he hears that she has been trained by Marwyn, not the dog. Probably better off if she'd been trained by Marwyn the dog. He might actually have a lot of medical knowledge at this stage.
he probably does.
Yeah,
he could probably physio on his arm.
He could probably deliver a few dragons now. But yeah, so we meet Miri Mazdur, who's instantly like, you can't trust this woman. Come on, like you were just raping through her people. Like, how can you trust this woman? It's almost as if for me, Dany is almost willing prophecy here. She's tempting fate all the time with this chapter, I feel. And I have a couple of questions, as usual. Does she poison Khal Drogo straight away? Who is the hairless man? And is Dany the Great Shepherd? And is she part of a prophecy that Miri Mazdur has seen, or some part of a prophecy that Miri Mazdur has been aware of? Or is she just a vicious old witch? So Claire, what do you think?
Sorry, I missed that. I was just replying to Florrie,
so
who's asking where our new friend has come from, and John saying new old friend, and I said Catherine picked him up from somewhere.
Yeah, he was shopping as well, and so what my question is, who is the hairless man? Does she poison Khal Drogo straight away? And is Dany the Great Shepherd? Has she been some part of a prophecy of these people as well? Or is she just an old witch that wants to play with them?
I got from that quote at the end, the Great Shepherd guards the flock. What she's trying to say here is, and she said in the chapter, you know, the humanity is the flock, including Dothraki. That's, for want of a better phrase, oh shit. It's, you know, she's just talking absolute bollocks there. And what she actually means is the Great Shepherd guards against the flock. I am the instrument of the Great Shepherd. And as we know, with what happens later on down the line, she actually says he will, you know, now that Rhaego is no more, you know, no great stallion will mount the world. No one, you know, no one. And so that's exactly what she knows what she's doing. She's again, double meaning, the Great Shepherd guards the flock. and she's ensuring that that's exactly what happens. The flock being protected from being trampled on by this unborn child. You know, and Dany even falls for, oh wow, she seems to know what she's doing. She's been trained by a Meister. Fancy being my midwife? You know, I'm just about to kind of like drop this child, and you seem quite handy. I don't know who the like great hairless one is or whatever, but I do know that right from the very beginning, Mirri Maz-Dur was protecting the landmen from the Dothraki, and she very opportune. She took a moment, she had a chance, and this was it. And Dany was naive to ever think, well, hang on a minute, I've just saved you from being raped multiple times by the Dothraki. You know, you owe me something. But there's also this feeling of like, you know, this slavery issue of, you know, you now belong to me, you're my slave, I can do what I want with you. I'll be merciful and I'll be gentle and I'll be whatever, you know, I'll be womanly, but you now belong to me. But she does harden herself up a little bit here, Dany, where she's saying this is war, this is what it looks like, these are the kind of things that happen, but then she hears the young girl crying and it turns things around for her. And this is something that's burned into Dany's heart for a long time. And I think probably in the next chapter, or definitely coming up, she gets this girl's name and it sticks in her head. I think she dies. And I'm spoiling it probably for the next section that we're going to read, but this name sticks into her head, and then right at the very, and she actually vows if she ever sees, I think it's called Jogo, and what, who, yeah, he was basically raping this lamb girl, and she ends up dying, and she has this. She makes this promise to herself, Dany, that if she ever sees Carl Jogo again, that she will basically destroy him. And that's exactly the same Carl that she's confronted with at the very end of Dance with Dragons. A Dance with Dragons, where she's with Drogon and she runs into the Dothraki. That's him. And she's carried this in her heart for a long time, that she will destroy him. She will end him the next time she sees him. So, yeah, sorry, just going back to this chapter. The way that that Jorah calls Dany child, refers to her as child all the time. And it's just like, because you know how he's kind of thinks of her. And yeah, it just, every time he calls a child, it just makes me kind of go, no. But yeah, that's pretty much it from me, really. Just, yeah, the Dothraki are savages, but that's who they are. That's their culture.
So yeah, Jorah is a real creep in this chapter, complete creep. And also the fact that he's saying to the Khal, oh, you know, bring all the lamb people to this place, you'll get better money for them, and you know, this will get our ships to Westeros. It just makes me wonder, how can Dany ever hope to control those impulses in the Dothraki, and what kind of army does she think she's going to bring to Westeros? Like, what kind of, you know, what is she unleashing in Westeros? It's kind of worrying, especially when you see how confusing and undisciplined most battles are in Westeros when we get to the next Tyrion chapter. Yeah, because the Dothraki aren't. They're like a legitimate force. By the way, could Khal Drogo have survived the injury? Could he have survived this injury? Yeah, John is saying yeah. Okay. So, John, where do you stand on this chapter?
Well, to answer your question first, I don't think Mirri Maz-Dur wanted or was poisoning Khal to begin with, or Drogo to begin with. it turns out that he didn't like the feeling and the pain that was coming by the fire. And so him drinking the milk of the poppy and all that stuff caused the biggest problem. And I think this is a great way of George introducing, another religion that has nothing to do with Westeros, where people just followed the god, even though they were right or not right. They just followed the god blindly, and they're servants of the god. The hairless man, could have been R'hllor. I'm not quite sure, but that would be my guess. And there was a third question. I'm sorry.
The Great Shepherd thing. Do you think there's anything to that, or like Claire, do you think she's just full of bullshit?
Well, I think she believed it, but I think this is George's way of introducing, like I said, yet another religion that's not a part of Westeros religion. And the shepherd is just absolute perfect way of George attacking, Christianity, and how the men that follow Christ, the great shepherd, is just his dislike for them. That's all.
But there is a lot of, I feel, with Dany's arc, there's a lot of Messiah-esque kind of symbolism in that she leads people, rather than like Cal, who just like kind of rolls over whole people. Yeah. I also like the fact that later on, is it like the dragons also start to attack like people who are very similar to the Lamb people as well, don't they? Later on in the series. So she's kind of faced with that again. But Jorah is so creepy here. He's so creepy.
Well, I don't understand why a lot of people like him, other than the fact that Ian Glenn is a great actor and he's so well liked in the UK and throughout Europe. But I never understood why people liked Jorah from the beginning, especially finding out his second wife, the Hightower situation, and him, just the whole story's just, like you said, creepy.
And he's hairy. He's really hairy.
Exactly. Except for his head.
Yeah, so like, maybe they're just into hirsute creepy people. I don't know. But yeah, Ian, what is it, Ian Glenn or Ian McGlenn? Was it? Anyway, he's really good looking, so that helps people win him over. But yeah, that's the Dany chapter. It's kind of relatively straightforward, I feel, that Dany chapter. Miri Mazdor, by the way, one of the best names in the series, I feel like. She's a great name. That name is brilliant. And then we're on to Tyrion 8, our last chapter today. And this is where we finally meet Shay. And John, I think it's our turn to start with you, even though we just ended with you. I think it is our turn to start with you, which is kind of fitting because we started with you on Tyrion 7. Oh, sorry. Simon said Dany Mercy kills the Khal, as Varys put it to Ned. Interesting. Yes. It's kind of hard to see how Dany can ever take Westeros with Khal Drogo, to be fair. Like, it's hard to see how they could ever have gone forward with him being, with him surviving. Again, another kind of, even though Jason Momoa is amazing as Khal Drogo, I think it's another, like with Jorah, it's another character that people fall in love with because he's so good in the show, but he's really nasty in the book in a lot of ways. So
yeah, he's much more barbaric in the book.
Definitely. I love the Dothraki culture. I'm really interested in the Mongols and all that kind of thing. I think it's a really nice reflection of that culture. But yeah, so we have Tyrion 8, and Tyrion has Bronn bring him a Lady of the Night. And a lot of mystery around where he gets this girl, Shay. And then we have a battle, and it turns out that Tyrion and his Vale clansmen have been positioned in a particularly dangerous part of the battle on purpose by Tywin. And at the end, they the Lannisters, especially Tyrion, who can't help, who almost laughs out loud, thinking about Robb and the mistakes Robb has obviously made in this battle. But we will learn very, very quickly when we get to Cat's chapter that Robb pulls off one of the greatest military hoodwinks, I think, in the series. And one of the few times, maybe the only time, I think, but definitely one of the few times that Tywin is going to seriously underestimate his opponents. So, yeah, so what did you think of Tyrion 8, John? What did you get out of this one?
It's a great chapter because to me it reveals that Tywin wants Tyrion dead, 100%, without a doubt. You don't send your son into the vanguard under any circumstances, much less the fact that he's got a physical disability, where I didn't even know where to begin with that one. It's just crazy. You know, he's got the mountain that rides to do all of that. He's got he can send the clansmen if he wants. He doesn't have to have Tyrion there. But yeah, that was just 100% proof that he doesn't want Tyrion as a son, doesn't want him in the family. Just used him as an excuse because Cat took him to start the war. As far as the battle itself, Robb just shows over and over again he's got this uncanny ability to win battles. I don't know where that comes from, to be honest with you, because Edmure doesn't show it. The Blackfish is a great soldier, but he's not a leader. You know, we know the Hoster's been in the many battles with the Ninepenny Kings, but he doesn't have any great accolades for that. And certainly Ned has had quite a few victories in battle with Dragonstone, or Storm's End, rather, etc., King's Landing. But it's just a miracle that the way that Robb's able to do this time after time. So,
do you think that, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself here a little bit, but do you think that without Cat's involvement, like messing up like political lines like we saw with the Frey thing, Robb could have been successful?
100%.
Because I kind of feel like she's the big problem there.
That's why she was inserted into that storyline, because she could have easily gone from the Vale back to Winterfell.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, we talked about that the last time. It's still unclear why she does that. And I'm still leaning towards the fact she's being manipulated in some way. But I don't want to overplay the potential role
Or
that
she's the
Bran is going to
manipulator.
have. Sorry.
Or she's the manipulator.
Yeah. She's it's very it's very confusing, that one, especially in the next chapter. But I do just what you were saying there about Tyrion. I love that line where Tywin notices he's been wounded, and Tyrion says, "Oh, thanks for noticing." Or is it a one-armed dwarf you want as well? It's just, he always has these great comebacks with Tywin.
I know you've been asking questions, but my question for you two is: was Shay Tywin's whore to begin with?
Yes, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that I don't know why he sent her the night. Maybe he thought, oh, I don't know, maybe part of him thought that Tyrion should have one last hurrah. I don't know. Maybe one last gift to his son. I don't know. I definitely think Bran tells him, because that's a recurring thing throughout this chapter, Tyrion trying to find out which lord she was taken from, because he doesn't want to end up being beside that guy in battle and then that guy not helping him because, you know, Tyrion took his whore or whatever. And Bran doesn't tell him, and Bran, instead of saying who it is, Bran just says, "Don't worry, I'll be with you. I'll be beside you the whole way through the battle." And of course, as soon as the battle gets started, where's Bran? He's gone. So, and Tyrion is left to fend for himself. So I definitely think it was it's Shay was with Tywin, but also I think Bran is with Tywin. And you had questions about that before, Claire, as to why Bran even ends up going to the Vale with Tyrion and Cat, and that perhaps he was planted all along, or maybe it's just opportunistic. It might be a combination of just being opportunistic and being in the right place at the right time and offering his services to the actual guy with the actual money. Because when in that last chapter, when Tyrion goes in with all the clansmen and says, "Oh, I've made promises to all these guys," yeah, you've kind of promised all of your dad's money. You haven't promised anything that you own. So I think Bran is very quickly kind of very savvy to that. And even when Tyrion says, "Remember, I can always offer you more than anyone else," I mean, he's obviously going to be offering his dad's money all the time. So yeah, no, I definitely think that Shay was definitely something to do with Tywin. I also like the continuity here with Shagga getting the arrows and just pulling them out of his mail. And it's just this nice continuity from Khal Drogo's arrow at the end of Dany's chapter. And we find out that half of the clansmen have been killed, which is it's really tragic. I feel that it's just horrible. And also that, again, the potential for Frey Lannister alliance here, because we find out that one of the Manderleys is taken, a couple other people are taken before Freys have been taken. So Walder Frey has a lot of interest now in making a pact with Lannister. It's in his best interest to do that, even though he has lots and lots of Freys and lots of Frey kids. The fact that there's 4 now being captured, he has a lot to negotiate with Lannister. So yeah, so sorry, Claire, I think I accidentally just stood all over your turn, but it is your turn.
No, that's okay. That's all right. I'm just reading. Yeah, Sonny says that makes me think Bron is also a plant. Yeah, that's precisely what I think is happening here. I think if Shay belongs to Tywin, then Bron probably does as well. And I think, this is a guy who wouldn't want to take any chances whatsoever with anything. Everything is perfectly controlled by Tywin. He's like the puppet master of Westeros. And his son has decided to just wander off on his own and go off on his own travels. And I think Tywin's thought, nope, that's not happening. He's going to get himself into too much trouble. And yeah, I can't be bothered whether he lives or dies, but he's got my name and he's not going to be this, rogue agent on behalf of my family. So I'm going to clamp eyes on him all the time. And lo and behold, in this predicament that Tyrion's in, Bron sweeps in and saves him, and so yeah, I think there's definitely something to that. Simon said Ned in the dungeon is told by Varys that your mercy kill the king, and Dany mirrors this in Miri Mazda. Yes, your mercy kill the king. Yeah, it is mirrored, definitely. Yeah, I think there is actually quite a bit of nice kind of poetic linking from one chapter to the other. I like that about Shagga plucking the arrows from his chest, in contrast to Drogo. I think you've already mentioned really a lot of what I was going to say in this chapter, and I've mentioned it before about them putting each other down in front of others, him putting him into the vanguard. John's mentioned that. Just the fact that Shay makes Tyrion so comfortable and so at ease, and so this feels very. She hoodwinks him immediately into this very false sense of security. My giant of Lannister. So who actually won this battle? Can you just clarify it for me? Because it sounds like it was a Lannister victory.
Yeah.
But we're saying that Rob's never lost a battle, but he's lost this one, hasn't he?
Yeah, but he gets Jamie. So
what happens is he's got a small amount of people that go against Tywin and lose.
Yeah.
Most of those were Freys, by the way.
those
that's
were
why
Freys. Ah, yeah.
most of them, yeah.
Yeah.
So the other part, the majority of his army was sent after River Run and attack the Lannisters that are trying to siege River Run, and that's where they capture Jamie.
Do you think that the Starks or Rob's wins in the field, because this is a strategic win, I guess you're right.
It's a sacrifice.
Yeah. But do you think that the majority, you were saying earlier, John, about, he seems really lucky and he's winning all these battles and he's the young wolf and he seems to be, it's almost miraculous in a way, especially when he's not even there on this occasion. Do you think that this is Roose? Do you think Roose is the one who's like magic in the, he not magic, but he has this, we know about Roose. We know in hindsight about Roose's ambition. I think that would drive him into many victories in the field, in battle. And it's at this point, interestingly, when we're talking about the Stark commanders being captured right at the very end, with the Karstarks and the Freys, and it's slipped in there that Roose Bolton has escaped. So Roose Bolton is up to all kinds of things at the moment, but what we know is that he wants the North. So we know that because we've got the benefit of being able to know what happens in the story in the future. But I think he's exceptional in the field because he's got that drive to, this is going to be him. This is going to be his North. He's manipulating everything already. And I think the fact that he's escaped here, that it's at this point that probably behind the scenes, cloak and dagger meetings between Tywin and Roose Bolton are happening right now.
I think so too.
Yeah. So I definitely think. I thought that just from a kind of descriptive writing point of view, I thought the description of the battle was amazing. Just the noise, the noise of the battle, the horns and the trumpets and the hissing of the arrows going past, and the kind of perspective from Tyrion and how difficult that must have been. I've put in my notes Tyrion did very well in battle. He did amazingly well in battle. And if you think about, I remember reading this in the books and it must have had some impact on me the first time, because I remember being bitterly disappointed of the TV show. I don't know if you remember this episode, but he literally walked out of the tent and then just got mashed into the ground. And that was it. He was just out of it. And it was like that really takes something away from Tyrion, because this was his first win in battle. It also, yet again, illustrates to us that this is an obvious one, but the double meaning of words, when he's very clear, when Tyrion says yield, and what he's doing is yielding, but the Stark knight says, yes, I do, I yield. And it gets all kind of mixed up. It's like, lucky Tyrion. Because you're right, he didn't have blonde hair at the time, which again makes me think he's definitely Tywin's creature. The description of Tywin in battle, commanding the reserve, and glorious with just the infinite detailed description of his armor. I just thought all of that was a real thrill, actually, to read that about the description of the battle. And that's pretty much all I got really for that chapter.
I think you're completely right about Roose Bolton. And as I say, like going back to Kat's chapter, I think Roose definitely knows that he's the Frey of the North. And that if Rob is willing to send all of these Freys in to be sacrificial lambs so he can get Jaime, well, he would do it with Bolton men. He would, like, without even thinking. So I do think it's interesting that they get a Kerwin, a Karstark, a Manderley, and a Hornwood, but no Bolton. So how does he get away when the others don't? It's unclear whether he is working with Tywin at this stage, because Tywin is only hearing this for the first time, or so we think, or at least so Tyrion can see. Because definitely Tywin wouldn't make him privy to that because he couldn't trust that guy. So unless, I don't know how that would have worked, but it could be that Roose escaped because he was allowed to escape. But I'm not sure. The thing about the battle description, one of the things, I know everybody's excited for, a potential battle in the north with Stannis, but one of the things I'm really looking forward to is more of the Battle of Fire. I absolutely love that released chapter with Barristan's speech and everything from the Winds of Winter. So, I mean, I think all of these little skirmishes and even bigger battles that we've had, especially in Storm and things like that, are all building to some majorly big battles in Winds of Winter, which I am so excited about. But yeah, so John, what do you think about Roose Bolton at this stage before we head off?
Well, I think this is another example of the TV show giving us a character that's not the book character. Bruce is a very quiet, um, demure kind of a person. He's being leeched all the time. Arya sees him in Harrenhal in bed. So we get a different example of Bruce in the show. That's one of the reasons why I don't really agree that Bruce has the ambition. He just is in the right place at the right time with the phrase, and he's able to do that. He doesn't have an heir, so that's one of the reasons why he works with Walder in regards to buying Walda, basically, or getting paid to take Walda. Yeah, it's a little bit different. I don't think he's as smart as what we think because of the show, but he's obviously important to the North.
Yeah, it's so funny because the actor that plays him in the show is an actor that I've grown up watching on Irish TV, playing
Sure.
like really madcap comic characters, and he's a super intelligent guy as well. Like he's a big theatre actor. So you're right, he does bring a lot of gravitas to the role, and he's an amazing character actor as well. So he definitely isn't the Roose that we meet in the books, but I think like Walder Frey, I think he may be underestimated because he appears to be so weak to other characters. So,
He's definitely strong in his opinion because he shuts Arya down in no time at all.
Yeah.
So
I actually, yeah, I loved the scenes with Tywin and Arya in the show, but I do miss that kind of interaction with Roose for sure. But they couldn't, it would have been too far from the character if they had put Roose in that position because the actors given us a different brief, I think, on that character. But yeah, so it does give us a nice taste for the battle to come, and we're going to have the old switcheroo in the next chapter with Cat and Jaime being taken. Spoiler alert. Sorry, guys. So yeah, so that's it for our reread this week. Unless you guys have anything else that you want to add.
No, just that the next lot of chapters, we've only got 5, yeah?
5, yeah, that's right. Cat 10 to Sansa 6. So it's chapter 63 to chapter 67. It's I think it's the shortest amount we've read so far, but the chapters are quite long in it. So yeah.
And John, will you be joining us again, or is this a special guest appearance?
I think it should be a special guest appearance because I feel pretty lucky to be here. But I usually work on Sunday, so
well, when you're
I
not, feel
probably
free to
won't.
drop by. Feel free to drop by. You
I
don't
really
need to have
appreciate it.
read the chapters. I'm sure, I'm sure that you've got input anyway from
Oh yeah,
having read them.
my strainer for a brain. There's nothing stays up there, especially with these books.
I got cut out again. Sorry, I got cut out when John said, "What were you saying? Are you going to join us next week, or what did you say?"
Probably not.
Oh, okay. Okay, no problem. Well, you're welcome anytime, obviously. It's an open
Thank you so
invitation.
much.
Thank you so much for joining us. I feel like I need a lot of help with the military stuff. I don't always get it.
No problem.
Yeah. So, well, thank you, John. Thank you, Claire. Thank you to everybody who joined us in the chat. And Claire and John are both linked down below, so please go and check out their channels. And happy belated Thanksgiving to all of our American friends and everybody who celebrated Thanksgiving. And I hope everybody has an amazing week. We will see you back for Cat 10 to Sansa 6. So thanks a million, Claire. Thanks, John. See you all again soon. Bye.
Bye.